Nearly there, but I'm so ready to be done with this experiment. I just want to start my days with black coffee again. This video is sponsored by Shopify. Today, we're going to talk about the coffee-related advice from Dr. Andrew Huberman. And more than talk about it, we're actually going to test it. Now, if you don't know who Andrew Huberman is, I am genuinely quite surprised. He is, I think, the most successful and widespread science communicator on the internet. He's a Stanford professor, but it's his podcast, The Huberman Lab, that is incredibly successful. In his words, it discusses science and science-based tools for everyday life. Now, one particularly viral aspect of Dr. Andrew Huberman's sort of advice is his morning routine, something that people have made a lot of videos about.
I tried Andrew Huberman's morning routine.
Now, these protocols are so popular that if you go to his website, well, that's what they're going to give you in exchange for you signing up for his newsletter. It's kind of have my daily protocols as a little PDF. That's the sort of carrot to sign up. So it's a thing that people want. And loads of people have looked at these, tried them, tested them, and people ask me about them for one specific reason. In there, he makes a very specific recommendation regarding your coffee in the morning.
I purposely delay my caffeine intake to 90 minutes to 120 minutes after I wake up. One of the factors that induces a sense of sleepiness is the buildup of adenosine. I want to make sure that I don't have a late afternoon or even early afternoon crash from caffeine. One of the best ways to ensure a caffeine crash is to drink a bunch of caffeine, block all those adenosine receptors, and then by early or late afternoon, when that caffeine starts to wear off and gets dislodged from the receptors, a lower level of adenosine is able to create a greater level of sleepiness.
Now, that's very compelling. The biology, the biochemistry of it all makes sense to me. It's presented with a great deal of confidence as if this is fact. Makes sense that I should skip my morning coffee. I should wait, and I will feel better later in the day. But there's an important thing to understand that I don't think is properly disclosed here. This may be science-based tools for everyday life, but the science behind this isn't really there. This recommendation is kind of an inference. It's a recommendation based on some studies, but none that have asked and answered this exact question. There are no meta-analyses of multiple studies. There's no single study that looked at, if you skip your morning coffee, if you delay caffeine, do you prevent an afternoon crash? So while the biology may be correct, this question has not been answered conclusively. Now, you might say, well, this kind of empirical observed data from people who've taken the advice and say they don't have afternoon crashes anymore. The problem with that data is that they have made an effort, they've invested some time and energy into changing an aspect of their lives. They are motivated to see an outcome. So there's some bias in that data. I'm interested in what is the actual truth. Now, I'm going to bring up another internet-based science communicator, the king of clipped audio himself, Dr. Lane Norton. Now, he is a nutritional PhD with a background in biochemistry and powerlifting, who has a YouTube channel in which he gets very angry about the use and abuse of science in the world of sports, health, longevity, wellness, all those kind of things. I'm going to steal from Lane. I'm going to steal one of his examples, right, which is he made a video because someone had suggested that drinking coffee raises cortisol. And that is true. Drinking coffee raises the stress hormone cortisol a little bit. And high levels of cortisol are associated to high levels of body fat, actually storing more body fat. So someone made a video saying, skip coffee because it will cause you to spike your cortisol and therefore put on body fat. And he makes the point that first part is true, coffee spikes cortisol, but if you actually look at the randomized control trials, that isn't what you see.
If we take people and we have them take caffeine or drink coffee and all other things are equal, do they gain body fat? No, they do not. In fact, sometimes the opposite happens.
And his argument is, what you've got here is a single mechanism.
You find a mechanism, a specific hormone, and you say, ooh, this raises that hormone. That means you're going to get this downstream effect. Outcomes are not just a single mechanism. Usually, whole body outcomes are the accumulation of hundreds, if not thousands of mechanisms all occurring at the same time that actually results in an outcome.
And so you can't just pull one mechanism and expect it to sort of directly produce a certain outcome in the world of biology, because we are weird and complex meatbags. The thing about mechanisms is you can just totally cherry pick them. I'll give you an example. Adenosine, mentioned earlier on? Well, genuinely, it increases hair growth and hair thickness. And so if coffee does cause you to have higher levels of adenosine in the blood, then drinking coffee should give you a fuller, thicker head of hair. Clearly ridiculous. Or is it? So this brings us back to Dr. Andrew Huberman's advice. Are we looking at just a single mechanism here? And actually the outcome of having an afternoon crash may have a bunch of potential mechanisms acting on it, and this particular one that we're testing isn't the most important. That's the kind of question I'm interested in asking and answering. And this brings us back to Dr. Huberman's advice regarding delaying your coffee consumption. Are we just dealing with a single mechanism here? And actually, there are a lot more mechanisms and more complexity that plays into the particular outcome of having an afternoon crash. Here's what we're going to do to test it. Every morning, within 30 minutes of waking, I must consume coffee, but I won't know whether or not it's got caffeine in it. Now you're thinking, whoa, whoa, whoa. There is no way you could brew and make coffee and drink coffee every morning without knowing if it's got caffeine in it. Decaf brews differently, it tastes different. You're not going to be blind in this particular experiment. And this was a real challenge because I wanted to still consume coffee as part of this rather than take, say, a caffeine pill or a placebo in the morning, because coffee is more than just caffeine. In the end, we decided the best thing to use was Cometeer. They produce frozen capsules of extracted coffee liquid. As a disclosure, I have work and do work with Cometeer. They're not paying to be a part of this. In fact, we paid full price for the capsules that we've bought for this experiment. But because we can use different roasters, different roast levels, it adds a nice level of randomness to the whole thing. Plus, when I drink the coffee, it will be with a good slug of dairy in there as well to further mask the taste. Each capsule will be labeled with an alphanumerical code that I will log each day, and I won't know what the contents of the capsule are. After the first 2 hours after waking, coffee consumption will return to normal. Anything that I drink, I will log down in terms of what time I had it, how much coffee, and therefore roughly how much caffeine I've had. That'll be logged to the whole thing, and coffee drinking will continue as normal. Then, to test for the afternoon crash, every day between 3 and 4 p.m., I will do a PVT, which is a psychomotor vigilance test. It's basically a reaction test where you respond to something on a screen, and the quicker you tap, the faster your responses are. It's commonly used. NASA make a nice little app because they use it on the International Space Station, actually, to sort of test people's levels of cognition and how well rested they are, those kind of things. And then there will also be a 10-question questionnaire covering how tired I feel subjectively. Am I exhausted or not? Am I fatigued? Am I sleepy? Do I want to lie down? Do I want to close my eyes? Is it difficult to hold a conversation with someone? And that will be the kind of measurement for the afternoon crash. And at the end of this, they should be able to see if there is a correlation between having no caffeine for the first 2 hours and no afternoon crash, or not. Now again, you're going to say, well, hang on a minute. N=1 experiments, all well and good, but they're not that useful. If it's just me doing the test, what good is that? Good point. I have, for this one, roped in the rest of the team here at the YouTube studio, so 5 of us will be taking part. Again, that's not a very big sort of sample size, but you would expect that if this mechanism were true, at least one of us should experience a correlation between no morning caffeine and no afternoon crash. I, however, do have a different theory about this whole thing, which I will tell you later on. And so we wanted to capture a bit more data. So all of us will be wearing wearables throughout this whole thing that will track things like sleep, quantity and quality, and sort of how much we're exercising, those kind of things. So we'll have some additional metrics alongside all our caffeine consumption to see a little bit more about what's going on. And so in 30 days, we should hopefully have an answer to this question. Is Andrew Huberman right? Now, all of this has been a fairly complex thing to get going, and it's been a quite intense experiment to set up, and I'm grateful to the sponsor of this video, Shopify, for supporting this particular video, making it happen. I've been a huge fan of Shopify now for pretty much 16 years, and I'd like to tell you why in this short ad. Shopify is a commerce platform that allows you to start, grow, and manage your business. I have a lot of experience with Shopify, going all the way back to 2008 when Square Mile Coffee Roasters, we first started selling online. Things were simple then, we were a small business. And over the years, we've grown and we've expanded and things have gotten more complex and Shopify has grown and supported us right the way through. In fact, when it came time to start another business, when we had tens, hundreds, thousands, the merch business that we have here, of course we were going to build it on Shopify. Everything is just so easy. From creating your store, you can build one that looks great very easily, very quickly, through to things like integrations with, say, third-party warehousing that allows us to manage stock in different continents and those kind of things. Shopify has been the platform right at the center of it, with one of the best converting checkouts in the world at the heart of it. So wherever you are in your business journey, whether you're starting a business or growing a business or running a large business, I would strongly recommend checking out Shopify. And you can do so with a free trial if you go to shopify.com/James Hoffmann and see for yourself how great it is. Thank you so much to Shopify for sponsoring this video. So here we are, 30 days later, the study is done. And I have to say, I'm glad it's done. I didn't particularly enjoy the last 30 days in a funny sort of way, and I don't think any of the team did enjoy the study that much in the last 30 days, but we persevered. And the good news is we were compliant, I guess, under sort of study technical terms. We all did what we were supposed to do on the days we were supposed to do it. We all logged all of the data. And so, I think about this tiny little study and ways you can criticize it. And I think quite accurately you could say the number of participants was pretty small. It was just the 5 of us in the team. A larger number would have been better, but I still think there's value in what we did. Let's get to the answers. If we skipped caffeine for the first 2 hours, did we prevent an afternoon crash from happening? And so, under our terms, we define an afternoon crash in 2 ways. There was the subjective, the questionnaire, how did we feel, which produced a fatigue score. And then there was also the PVT, the reaction time test, an objective measure of our kind of slump, tiredness, whatever you want to call it. Here we go. Here's the first one. We're going to look at whether we had caffeine or not in the first 2 hours and our fatigue score, that kind of subjective measurement. Red is caffeinated at the start of the day. The kind of green is decaf at the start of the day, so no caffeine. And what we can say is there is no observable statistically significant difference in our perceived fatigue based on whether we had caffeine in the first 2 hours or not. It's important because you're going to look at that and think, well, hang on a minute, actually, that box kind of goes higher on the decaf one, and that line in the middle, which is the median score, is also higher for decaf. So it looks like you were actually worse if you didn't have caffeine first thing in the morning. At the top, you'll also see a p-value. I'm not going to define p-values today, forgive me. I'll just say for what we would consider statistically significant, a p-value should be smaller than 0.05. 0.291 is not smaller, and so this was not a statistically significant difference. This difference could have occurred just by random chance. So what we can say is there's no observable difference. It didn't make any difference. But did it make a difference to our physical reaction times? No, it didn't. Almost identical results here. Again, you could say, but the median line is a little bit higher on the decaf box plot. It doesn't matter. Again, at 0.313, not statistically significant. Basically, whether or not we started with caffeine had no measurable impact whatsoever in any of us over the 30-day period. So I would say, is Huberman's protocol correct? Well, under his explanation for it, no, I don't think so. Here's what I don't understand. Your levels of adenosine are at their very lowest upon waking. It accumulates during the day, in theory makes you sleepy towards the end of the day, and then while you're asleep, adenosine levels come down, and so when you begin your day in those first 2 hours is theoretically when your adenosine at its lowest. Why then am I worried about drinking coffee at that point when if caffeine is an antagonist that stops adenosine working, well, there's not much adenosine around anyway, so why worry about caffeine impacting me when it's not going to do much? It's not going to interrupt a signal that isn't very strong. What I don't get is if I delay my caffeine, well, if I'm waiting 2 or 3 hours, my levels of adenosine will be higher. That caffeine will be much more effective at interrupting the effectiveness of adenosine. Why am I not going to have a crash, well, a little bit later than I would have done? So my afternoon crash moves from 3, 4 p.m. to 5, 6 p.m. by delaying my caffeine 2 hours. Why? I don't understand that. But I do want to talk about what might have happened, because I'll tell you something. We all had bad afternoons at one point or another, not the same day, but we would all say over the month we had afternoons where we had an afternoon crash. I have a potential theory as to why that might happen, and we'll have some fun poking some holes in that too. Here's one of the most interesting things about the whole study. We looked at everyone's daily caffeine consumption. This is true for all of us, all 5 of us. If we did not have caffeine in the first 2 hours, we didn't make up for it later on in the day. So if you looked at the days where we had caffeine first thing in the morning, those days overall had higher levels of caffeine than days when we started with decaf and did not have caffeine for the first 2 hours. This suggests that coffee drinking is perhaps more ritualistic than it is medicinal. I would think, pretty true for all of us, we couldn't tell we hadn't had caffeine first thing in the morning. I thought I'd be able to tell caffeine from decaf, but I can't. And weren't then 2 hours later being like, oh, I really need a hit of caffeine. I'm going to consume more to make up for my kind of experience of being uncaffeinated. That isn't what happened at all. And so there ended up being days where we just didn't have any caffeine the whole day. One of those days, I definitely knew about that. Can't say for sure, but I'm fairly confident I haven't had caffeine today because I don't feel good. But I had 2 other completely caffeine-free days and I had no idea about it whatsoever, which is sort of heartening. I don't feel like an addict. That feels like a very positive thing, but it would mean that if you institute the protocol of skipping coffee for the first 2 hours, there's a pretty high chance you'll just drink less coffee. You will consume in the days ahead just less caffeine. It's for some people why intermittent fasting works, by skipping a meal. They just eat less by having less time to eat. Here's my alternative hypothesis. If you skip the first coffee of the day, you drink less caffeine, you sleep better, and therefore you have less afternoon crashes because you're better rested. That's it. Let's look at what the data says. The first signs are very encouraging. We looked at the impact of sleep on your fatigue score the next day. Pretty simple. If you have a bad night's sleep, are you more likely to have an afternoon crash? And the answer is yes. There was pretty good statistical significance that showed the better your sleep, the lower your fatigue score the next day. There was a correlation there that I would say is decently strong. That's good. That's not surprising. Is anyone surprised by that? I think any of us are surprised by that, but it's nice to see it borne out in the data. As a small caveat, the sleep data here is a calculated score based on kind of time sleep required and then time of sleep achieved as a percentage. So if you needed 8 hours sleep and you slept for 8 hours, you would have 100% sleep score under this particular wearable. Let's ask a different question. If I consume more caffeine on, say, day 1, will my day 2 fatigue score be higher? That's what we'd expect to see if caffeine's messing everything up, right? Like you might not sleep as well, and so your fatigue might be lower. And yes, again, that's what we see here. Pretty good, decently strong correlation in the data of statistical significance again, the p-value of 0.025. What we saw, the more caffeine you consumed, the next day, a little bit higher your fatigue score. Now, interestingly, that's the fatigue score, the subjective measurement. If you look at the PVT results, no, there's no significance there. Now, I'm glad we did the psychomotor vigilance test, PVT, because it was interesting, but from my own kind of subjective experience of it, you can definitely just try a bit harder and kind of juice your numbers. Like attention really seemed to be this thing for me that correlated with lower scores, and so choosing to be more attentive, to try harder, kind of had an impact, and that is sort of documented in the literature, which is a mark against PVTs, but still interesting. So here, what we saw is actually no real correlation between the two. If you had more caffeine, it didn't really impact your PVT score the next day. Now, this is really important. I could stop showing you any more data, and I could say, based on this, it seems that my hypothesis is true. Skipping caffeine in the morning reduces your caffeine consumption, and therefore you won't crash as much. But to round this out, we looked at total caffeine consumed and sleep resulting from that day's caffeine consumption. And we found no correlation between how much caffeine you had and your sleep score that night. Surprising, because we all know that caffeine and higher levels of caffeine interrupt sleep, but I feel like the message of this whole video is be skeptical of simple mechanisms impacting complex kind of outcomes. The quantity of your sleep can be impacted by so many other things. How hot is your room? How noisy is it where you are? How light is it? What time did you eat? What did you eat? Have you had alcohol? There's loads of different mechanisms playing into the quantity and quality of your sleep. Be wary. Anytime anyone, especially on the internet, gives you a nice, simple mechanism as a thing to use and abuse to improve your outcomes. In this case, it's skip caffeine for the first 2 hours to prevent adenosine buildup or whatever it's going to be. There's the neat little mechanism. I can't even say, if you reduce your caffeine, then you'll see more sleep. Because, again, while those two things can interact and can be shown to interact, that may not be true based on the other things going on in your life. Be wary of single mechanisms. They are a big red flag. They're very appealing. I'm compelled by them as much as the next person. The idea that a single supplement or a single exercise routine or a single little biohack can make my life better, it's desirable. I want it to be true. But we are weird, complex, fleshy bags of meat who don't particularly understand how we work still. We've learned a lot. We've done loads of experiments. We're still very much learning. Now, you can say this was not conclusive, but I think it was, and I hope it is, instructive. For us, we designed the best experiment we could. Dr. Huberman, if you're watching, do let us know if you want to see the raws on this. We'll happily share the data with you on that. I'm not going to share it publicly because the kind of team's privacy is part of this. But if you want to see and pick holes in it, you're very welcome to do so. But yeah, there you go. That's our experiment with Dr. Andrew Huberman's coffee drinking protocols. I'd love to hear your comments down below. Did you enjoy this? Is there a thing that we should have analyzed? I can think of a few more things. We do have stuff like caffeine timing, and so maybe serum caffeine levels at time of sleep onset. Maybe there's a correlation there between that and sleep quality. Who knows? But I feel like we've done some good science here today. But again, let me know your thoughts. What do you want to know? What haven't we answered? I'd love to hear from you down below. But for now, I want to say thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.